يسعد مساكم. معالي وزير الخارجية والمغتربين المهندس جبران باسيل، السيدات والسادة، فعاليات الجالية اللبنانية في أوقيانيا، يسعدني أن أتوجه إليكم اليوم باللغة العربية، لغتنا الأم، لما في التواصل بها من حميمية وعودة إلى الجذور، تعطي لمؤتمرنا هذا معناه ومبتغاه في العودة إلى الأصل، إلى ما يربطنا ويجمعنا في وطننا. أيها الحضور الكريم، يمثل الانتعاش الاقتصادي أولوية بالنسبة لبلدنا في ظل العهد الجديد، ويقتضي تحقيق هذا الانتعاش العمل على المستوى الدولي، إذ إن إعادة توزيع أوراق القوة في عالم معولم تستند بقدر كبير إلى المعيار الاقتصادي. ومن هذا المنطلق دأبت وزارة الخارجية والمغتربين في العمل على هذه الدبلوماسية الاقتصادية باعتبارها عاملاً أساسياً من عوامل النفوذ والازدهار، وبدأت بلعب دور حاسم لتحقيق ذلك، فتمثلت الخطوة الأولى بإجراء مسابقة تضيف إلى ملاك الوزارة الخارجي 16 ملحقاً اقتصادياً يتوزعون على بعثاتنا في الخارج حيث تدعو الحاجة، يتولون تطبيق الرؤية الاقتصادية التي تتبلور من خلال عمل دؤوب ومؤتمرات هادفة يمثل مؤتمرنا هذا إحدى ركائزها. إن الازدهار الاقتصادي لا يرتبط فقط بما تختزنه الدول تحت الأرض من ثروة، بل ربما كان الاقتصاد الذي يعتمد على ثروة كهذه هو اقتصاد الخمول، اقتصاد الترهل والتواكل. إن الاقتصاد الغني الواعد هو الاقتصاد الذي يعتمد على عقول بنيه النيرة الخلاقة وتخطيطهم الرؤيوي المستشرف. ولنا في غنى إنساننا المقيم والمغترب إذا تعاونا وتعاضدا ما يعد بمستقبل زاهر إن شاء الله. أما التبادل التجاري فيعتبر من أهم مقومات نجاح اقتصاد الدول وازدهاره، حيث تظهر أهميته في دوره الذي يدعم استفادة كل دولة من المميزات التي تقدمها الدول الأخرى، وهو وسيلة تساهم في تعزيز العلاقات الدولية بشكل مباشر. فما بالكم إذا كانت الجالية اللبنانية في أستراليا بحجمها ومقدراتها وتأثيرها الذي يدعو إلى الفخر والاعتزاز هي الرافد في طريق تعزيز التبادل التجاري بين لبنان وأستراليا. وفي هذا السياق لا بد من التأكيد على أن إقامة علاقات تجارية جديدة تحتاج إلى مشاركة المصارف التي تعمل على سد الثغرات، إذ أن التبادل التجاري يعتمد بشكل كبير على المصارف التي تكون مستعدة وقادرة على خدمة كل من المصدر والمستورد وتقديمهما إلى أسواق جديدة. ولا حاجة هنا للتذكير بما تكتنز المصارف اللبنانية من خبرة مميزة بل تفوق في هذا المجال. ومن جهة أخرى لا بد من الإشارة إلى دور غرف التجارة في تعزيز التبادل التجاري، إذ إنها أكثر الجهات غير الحكومية فعالية في دعم القطاع التجاري الخاص. وعلى الرغم من أن الجالية اللبنانية في أوقيانيا ليست الأكبر حجماً بين الجاليات اللبنانية حول العالم، إلا أنها من أكثرها تعلقاً وارتباطاً ووجدانياً بالوطن الأم لبنان، وهذا ما يكبر القلب ويفرحه ويعزز تفاؤلنا بأن نعقد عليها الآمال الكبار في تعاون مثمر يخدم اللبناني مقيماً ومغترباً. أيها الحضور الكريم، لقد جئنا من بيروت لنجتمع في هذا اليوم لنسمعكم صوتنا ونسمع صوتكم، لنستعيد الأمل، لنقول لكم إننا كجيل جديد من الدبلوماسيين عزمنا على أن نكون يداً بيد مع طاقات الجالية لدعم نهوض لبنان وازدهاره، وكلنا أمل في استكمال حلقة التعاون هذه من خلال عمل الطاقات الاقتصادية في الجالية من أجل تفعيل التبادل التجاري بين البلدين والترويج للصناعات اللبنانية في أستراليا ضمن أبناء الجالية اللبنانية خصوصاً وفي أستراليا عموماً، فيما يساعد لبنان على تعزيز مكانته الاقتصادية على الساحة الدولية. أيها الإخوة اللبنانيون الأستراليون، إن هجرتكم إلى أوقيانيا التي أبعدتكم عن أرض الوطن، سواء أكانت بسبب الحروب والآلام أم بسبب طموح لا تحده حدود يمتاز بها اللبناني، لن تقلل من تجذر الوطن في أعماق وجدانكم كما تجذر أرزه الخالد في أعماق جباله الشماء، بل أنتم فروع هذه الأرز التي انتشرت في مختلف أصقاع الأرض، وكلما ثبتنا ارتباطنا بالجذور صار سهلاً على لبنان النهوض والازدهار. من هذا المنطلق نحن في جلسة الحوار هذه اليوم لتحويل الأمنيات والأحلام إلى وقائع وحقائق واغتنام الفرص من أجل تحويل الهجرة اللبنانية إلى أستراليا من حسرة إلى نعمة تساعد لبنان على تعزيز دوره ومكانته دولياً من جهة وقوته وتماسكه داخلياً من جهة أخرى. عشتم وعاش لبنان. يسعدني أن أقدم الأستاذ فادي زوقي في كلمة مقتضبة، وهو President and Chairperson of Australian and Lebanese Chamber of Commerce Industry and a recipient of Order of Australia Medal. شكرا.
Your Excellency, Minister Jabran Basil, Minister of Immigrants and Foreign Affairs, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me first to express our deepest gratitude on behalf of the Australia-Lebanon Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Victoria for your hard work and all your team that have been around the world looking for Lebanese to go back to their country, to invest in their country, and also give them their rights. That before you, we saw that as a non-event. I want to thank also today all our diplomats here in Australia, in Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, and all over Australia for all your hard work in putting this wonderful event together. Mr. Basil, we as a Chamber of Commerce, we started 7 years ago. We saw that the only hope for Lebanon is to create an economic stimulus. And that's why we worked very hard on promoting Lebanon in Australia and among these communities, wider communities as much as the Lebanese community in Australia, to invest in Lebanon. This is the only way we can prevent economic terrorism to the country. The civil war finished years ago. However, we know the economy has been struggling for many years. And it's our duty all around the world to really invest today more than ever to prevent Lebanon from slipping into another civil war. Mr. Basil, as well, what I'd like to accentuate as well is that we promote Lebanon not just the 10,450 square meters. We promote Lebanon as the 18 million around the world, including 4.5 million in Lebanon. Therefore, it equates to the same level of population as Australia. So that's why we encourage Australians to come back and invest in Lebanon today more than ever. The other thing also I want to point out is that currently Lebanon is also experiencing a difficulty due to the Syrian refugees and among other refugees in the country that burden Lebanon immensely and its economy. So also we are lobbying the government non-stop to support Lebanon as a hosting country so that again we don't, as Lebanese in Lebanon and abroad, suffer the consequences. So again, once again, I want to thank you and thank all your team for all the hard work, for your belief in us to go back and invest in our country. And we hope you also pass the message across to the Lebanese government and our people in Lebanon to also invest equally in Australia, because Australia got a lot to offer to Lebanon as well. I thank you wholeheartedly.
Again, Mr. Fadi Zouki, the President and Chairperson of Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the recipient of Order of Australia Medal. And Mr. Michael Rizik, the Director of the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Gary Doos, a proactive senior and international trade advisor. And Mr. Hassan Musa, founder and president of the Australian Arab Business Council. Mr. Miltus Michaelas, CEO of the Bank of Sydney, and Mr. Roland Jabbour, President and National Chairman of Australian Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Fadi, I want to ask you first that how can you define positive marketing, and how can it benefit the trade between Australia and Lebanon?
During my engagement with Lebanon and Australia at a business level, I found out that there is a serious ignorance from the Lebanese business community of Australia and vice versa. And that's because of a lot of the negative media we had over the years that was a consequential of the civil war. And for that reason, we're trying very hard to promote Lebanon and its services, not just in Lebanon, as I said earlier, around the world as well, but also to promote all the Lebanese companies that are working endlessly in Australia under the radar that a lot of the Australian government hasn't yet recognized or put together under the census. So we need positive marketing from the Australian media as much as the Lebanese media.
Thank you. Mr. Michael, what makes you adamant that Lebanon, and Beirut in particular, is still the place to transact in the Middle East region?
Look, I think, I can speak about that subject with strength because of my personal past experience in Lebanon, even throughout the war. And for those of us that worked in Lebanon throughout the war and were able to see how we coped and how we kept our country going, how we kept our factories working, how we kept our ports active, that gives us a lot of strength to go forward. And for those of us that have seen all this taking place, even in the most difficult of times, when Lebanon was being bombarded from all sides, and to see how people cope, for sure, we have our utmost confidence that we can do a great deal more in times of peace. So that's what really gives us the drive to go forward. And in addition to that, we've never ever stopped doing, after I left Beirut, we're still doing the same thing from here and from over there. We never stopped. I know it's very hard for people to comprehend how can a country going through so much turbulences, whether security-wise or politically-wise, was able to cope. But we have coped. And I think that is a big plus for our people and for the resilience of our people. And that does not mean that we are above everybody else. It's just that we have this fantastic gift by God, probably, to cope with difficulties and really keep our country alive. And I always say it wasn't only for the diaspora to keep Lebanon on its feet, it's for the people that have remained in Lebanon. Because you cannot help somebody inside who is inactive, unable to do things, no matter how much help you give him. But that should be recognized. It's the people inside as well as the people outside.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Gary, how can Australian Lebanese business people benefit from available resources to assist in promoting future business in Australia?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. Basically, we arrange trade missions and overseas delegations and so on. So recently we took a mission to Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and the United Arab Emirates. So we analyze those foreign markets and find the right opportunities where there's a gap in the market for investors, exporters. And we understand that Lebanese business people are very highly capable, and we need to just focus the emphasis on building further the relationship with Lebanon and Australian businesses to find more market opportunities. And that's what we do, is verify the facts and the information properly to start with. And yeah, we're constantly working on different projects like that.
Thank you. Mr. Miltos, how can you define the relation between stronger banking and financial connectivity from one side and trade growth from the other side?
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Thank you also for having Bank of Sydney at this venue. Banking and trade go back together hand in hand for hundreds of years because they address generic issues about trade. First, there is a problem of communication, and then there is a problem of risks. Traditionally, banking has closed the gaps on those issues. First of all, acting as a big contributor to the communication that needs to be done, and then putting together financial products that address the risks that exist inherently in a transaction. So if an importer wants to import from another country, the exporter needs to trust that transaction and that contract will be honored. That's where banks traditionally came in. I have chosen to change the definition of what used to be network banking to connectivity because traditional banking cannot help in trade, enabling trade with countries like Lebanon, which are still in a healing process. You really need to have institutions that are willing and able to understand both markets and willing and able to get out of their comfort zone and design products that will serve the importer and the exporter in those two markets. We as Bank of Sydney understand that because of the connectivity we have with our parent, the Bank of Beirut Group, which has a long history in trade. And we understand that when exporters from Australia and importers from Lebanon, they ask us for facilities that they wouldn't easily get in this market. And we go ahead and do it because we know both markets. So connectivity is not just about communication and getting the information about the products out to potential businessmen, which we have been traditionally doing. And chambers of commerce do that very well too. It's not just about financial products that will solve the risk gaps. It's also about being able to take a risk higher than the average and really take part in the healing process between two markets.
Thank you. Mr. Hassan, what is the role of Australian Lebanese business people in building stronger cultural and trade connections between Australia and Lebanon?
Thank you, Ibrahim, and thank you for the panelists here. Can I say we heard last night, we heard this morning, we hear every day there is a strong Lebanese community presence in Australia. We're talking about close to 500,000 people of Lebanese descent. They, all of them, almost all of them, over generation are still extremely and strongly connected to Lebanon by virtue of the relations between them and relatives overseas or in Lebanon, the continuous visit and so on. If you look at these figures and look at how much trade and commerce happens between Australia and Lebanon, we see there's a huge gap between the two of them. That means either we failed as an Australian Lebanese community to be the conduit for commerce between Australia and Lebanon, or the environment is not appropriate, or the climate is not appropriate for us to conduct commerce. So I have this mantra that basically the Australian Lebanese community is totally underutilized by the Australian government, by the Lebanese government, to be the conduit for commerce between Australia and Lebanon. We understand the culture, we understand the commerce between the two countries, and we can play an extremely active role. But if we see the figures, say 0.2% of import from Australia to Lebanon, or 0.5% of export, right? It translates into very minuscule amount of import and export. That means there's another 95% that's happening and going somewhere else that we can benefit from if we can find the right climate and the right environment for the Lebanese community to play that role and do some more commerce.
Thank you. Mr. Jabour, how can you define the current trade and investment exchange between Australia and Lebanon? Does it reflect the potential of the Lebanese diaspora in Australia?
Thank you very much, Ibrahim, for the opportunity and for the organizers of this conference to discuss and explore a very important topic, and that is trade and investment between Australia and Lebanon. Trade and investment brings prosperity, and prosperity leads to peace and stability, and they are ingredients that Lebanon is very much in need of. First, I'd like to pay tribute to the organizers of this conference and to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs team, the professional team supported by our local diplomatic missions, our 3 diplomats who happen to be thrown on the ground running, who've only been here for a few weeks, and to put such an event in this manner and in such a short time is a credit to their abilities and to their skills and the level of engagement with the Australian community of Lebanese descent. So I think, you know, a worthy tribute for this great effort. It is very difficult to try and reconcile the gap between the enormous potential that exists between Australia and Lebanon in terms of bilateral relationship and the size of trade and investment between the two sides, which is very moderate and it doesn't exceed $70 million, and it's mainly in favor of Australia, with less than $10 million of imports from Lebanon. This is definitely not reflective of the enormous potential and the goodwill and the strong relationship that exists between the two sides. We've recently celebrated 50 years of diplomatic relationship between Australia and Lebanon. We are fortunate to have exceptionally good diplomatic representation on both sides, with our Australian ambassador to Lebanon, His Excellency Glenn Miles, and also our diplomats who are here, His Excellency our Ambassador Milad Raad, and the Consul Generals both in Sydney and in Melbourne. But unfortunately, the ability for maximizing the opportunity and the potential and to market all of the positive aspects that would attract a potential investor or a business person to trade in Lebanon require enormous resources. And those resources are not available. This team works under difficult circumstances with very limited resources and do what they're able to do with those resources. There is an inherent negative perception about Lebanon, about the political environment in Lebanon, about the security in Lebanon, despite the fact that there's been enormous improvements in this situation. And this entrenched negative perception means that many potential investors do not look at Lebanon as a destination. And I think this is reflected, and I think it filters through all aspects and all structures of Australia in terms of the public sector and the private sector as well. So this needs to be reversed, and it can only be reversed by a multi-pronged campaign to try and provide more information. I mean, it was quite interesting for me personally to hear about the services that are provided by a government institution or an instrumentality called Adele. And we've heard from the chairman, Itani. They are exceptionally good services and they're a major attraction for potential investors. They need to be communicated to the business community. We all have a role to play in this space, but I think governments would need to set the framework under which the private sector will function under. So there are many challenges, and I think we're often very idealistic about a bilateral relationship with Lebanon, rather than being realistic and confronting some of those challenges and some of those impediments which stand in the way of realizing that full potential. And I think this is a great opportunity to focus on these issues and to have a discussion to see how we can identify them and how we can confront them and deal with them.
هلا بدي اطلب من الاستاذ مايكل يتفضل ببرزنتيشن صغيره عن تجربته باستراليا.
Just begin by saying excellencies rather than go through the names again. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's only fair to begin by saying that we as an Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce are delighted to have the LDE being held here in Australia and in Sydney in particular, and can only voice our opinion and say, well done. To Lebanon's Foreign Affairs for the great effort over the last 4 years, well done to the Embassy and Consulate Generals of Lebanon, both in Sydney and in Melbourne, the diplomats who came from Beirut, for their great effort to organise this major event in Sydney and in a very short and record time. And believe me, I know exactly what I'm saying because I know what goes on into events as such and how long it takes to organise. So well done, Ambassador and Consulate General, and to all the staff, whether diplomats or otherwise. And I'm sure you all agree this is a great event done in a very short period of time, and we mean that. I'm sure that the Chamber is not foreign to anyone here, as we have been around for a long time and very active as far as trade is concerned between Lebanon and Australia and the whole Middle East region, offering our services and guidance to help the exporters or the importers to transact safely, whether in regard to accurate documentation, logistics, or methods of payment. No doubt, our continuous physical presence in both Australia and Lebanon is of enormous benefit, simply because we can deal with any arising matter and do what is necessary to address it in an appropriate manner. The ALCC was the first to hold exhibitions of Lebanese products and services in Sydney, and was the first to do the same in Beirut and on regular basis, and most recently a seminar on trade and investment at Le Royal Hotel in Beirut. We can proudly say that the following Lebanese products, and I'm sure you can see some of them being displayed over here, were launched in Australia by the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce. Various Arabic books that included dictionaries, novels, stories, medical, cooking, children, educational books, as well as most magazines published in Lebanon, exposing Lebanon's ability to produce quality books and publications in a period of enormous security hazards. And that was going on while the war in Lebanon was going on. And that's a big plus for Lebanon. Lebanese wine, arak, and beer, emphasizing Lebanon's history in winemaking and why the French have planted certain vineyards in the Bekaa Valley, producing the right grapes for a certain French wine. The reason, I was told, is the nature of a unique soil in some of the areas in the Bekaa Valley. It's worth mentioning that the natural Ksara Caves cellars, which is the largest natural cellars in the world. I'm not sure whether most of you know this. It's the largest natural cellar in the world. Was accidentally found in 1857 by a Jesuit priest who was at the monastery that was on the same site. Another product, ladies' fashions, for which the Lebanese designers are renowned for worldwide. We will be doing much more in the near future. We worked on the extra virgin oil, virgin olive oil, bottled and in bulk, whether on commercial basis or helping individuals import their own produce by showing them the proper way to do it. There is another product which we have promoted last year in a large scale, is the natural traditional soap produced by Khan al-Saboon. I'm not sure whether any of you have visited Khan al-Saboon in Tripoli. We were the first to introduce the natural soap of Lebanon. And that company, ladies and gentlemen, is doing extremely well in Europe. And that's a big plus for Lebanon, for somebody who's working on a product, soap. And it's a beautiful product. We were the first to introduce it in Australia. We have promoted Lebanese services in matters related to construction, whereby Lebanese professionals based in Lebanon can offer competitive rates to companies in Australia in the IT, and it's related to construction, and they're doing quite well. People keep asking, why you in the chamber are still firm believers that Lebanon is able to survive all the traumas, political or otherwise, and regain all that was lost as a result of the turbulences that have ravaged Lebanon for a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, the answer is quite simple. You either believe in your people's resilience and ability to overcome existing problems and push forward, or sit back and allow others to do so. I say this because of our ongoing personal experience in Beirut ever since the start of the war that erupted in 1975, right throughout, all the wars that followed, and how the people were able to cope and keep Lebanon on its feet. I could tell you many factual stories, which I have told many times over the years, whether in universities, government-sponsored seminars, or other events, both here in Sydney and in Beirut. In all our presentations at all the LDEs, we have mentioned our ongoing policy to promote Beirut as a hub to transact in the whole Middle East region, and especially now that we are witnessing the emergence of new markets in Syria and Iraq. Lebanon is already active in handling in-transit shipments, and that is a fact. And I'm in contact with some of these companies who are actually transacting right at this moment, handling shipments of primarily building material through the ports, through the two ports of both Beirut and Tripoli. Not only that Lebanon is ideally situated to play a major role in the region and the reconstruction of Syria and Iraq, but it's the human resources, whether it's the business community or the person at these ports, that makes Lebanon ideal to play that role. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. I will start again with Mr. Fadi. How can the Lebanese government support Australian Lebanese business people in promoting Lebanese products in Australia?
Thanks, Ibrahim. I think, first and foremost, for the Lebanese government to continue the leap of faith that our minister has taken around the world in seeking out the diaspora, first and foremost, and encourage them to come back and invest in Lebanon, is to hold a lot of trade missions to Lebanon. It's very important for the Lebanese government to actually hold exhibitions for counterparts from Australia and their counterparts around the world. Secondly, something that we have launched through His Excellency in Lebanon is the International Chamber House. That is very important to actually bring it to fruition, to unite Chamber House around the world, to unite all the Chamber of Commerce around the world, to have a residence in Lebanon in order to encourage investments and also learn a lot about the opportunities that exist in Lebanon, and as a, if you like, as a platform from Lebanon to the MENA region. So the Lebanese government has to be proactive, far more proactive than it has been in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Michael, thanks again for your presentation. Is Lebanon's tourism on your agenda?
Very much so. No, it could never be otherwise.
What do you have projects for?
Look, you know, we are on the go all the time. At the moment, we are trying to, and we are doing it. As I said in my talk, that Beirut now is playing a major role. And in fact, people are not aware that things are already happening in Lebanon. And in fact, they started a while back. So these companies are not waiting for stability to prevail. They're already doing things. And we are trying to encourage more Australians to be involved. It's a bit difficult because the Australian attitude is still somewhat very reserved. But we're working on it. At the same time, of course, we keep on working on promoting more products to come from Lebanon, particularly in the IT now, in the IT services. And the services, I think we made some good headways, where companies here in the construction business, engineers or architects, are seeking help from Lebanon and at very competitive prices.
Thank you. Mr. Gary, how can the Australian government help Australian Lebanese business people for enhancing trade between the two countries?
Yeah. The good thing about Austrade and the New South Wales Business Chamber is that Lebanon's considered an emerging market in their perspective, whereas the USA and Europe are established markets. So there's a lot more export and trade services into emerging markets of the Middle East. So in that regard, Austrade can help you with assessing the market, understand the opportunities, and find the gaps for your product, whether it's investment, export related, and also work with the key exporters who have the products that are more value added, not talking about exporting in large volumes, the mega exporters, but the exporters who export to multi-markets. There's about 10,000 of them throughout Australia. They export about 40 billion worth of all our exports. They're highly capable companies that can export into high growth markets in the Middle East, Asia and so on. And we really target services towards them, whether it's one-on-one work, consulting work, or accompany them with some hand-holding to do trade missions into Lebanon and nearby markets.
Thank you. Mr. Miltos, how can you illustrate the experience of the Bank of Sydney and its role played in order to increase trade growth?
Thank you, Ibrahim. A good question. In terms of Bank of Sydney, one has to remember that we have perfect connectivity with the Lebanese market and Lebanon. We are owned by Bank of Beirut, 100%, and our group's values and experience and knowledge are embedded in us. In this 25 years of Bank of Beirut's business model, the commitment to the Lebanese diaspora has been phenomenal. And even though I've been in the group for only 1.5 years, I cannot fail but to respect the commitment that our group has to Lebanon and to the Lebanese diaspora internationally. And banking beyond borders for us is more than that. It's about connecting and connecting the diaspora and helping Lebanon. A lot of people in this group, headed by our group chairman for these last 25 years, have spent years visiting countries where there's big pockets of Lebanese diaspora and carrying the message of finding ways to work with the motherland. I come from very close to Lebanon myself, Cyprus, and I can take in the values that I see in this group because I grew up with the same kind of problems, issues with our home country, which went through a number of problems too. I wish Cyprus could get that kind of support from its own immigrants across the world. In terms then of feeling connected, we are 100% connected. And in terms of finding solutions for our customers here in Australia and our Lebanese customers in Lebanon to trade between the two, we are the most willing and able. And we have been doing that for the last 5 years. We are very big in the trade finance business. I think my colleague Fawaz talked about it earlier. And our experience and success in that area also stems from an inherent strength in the group. Our group, Bank of Beirut, is extremely strong in trade finance. In the last 6 years, it has been opening more LCs than any other bank in Lebanon. We trade in the Middle East and Northern Africa region more than most other Lebanese banks would do. And the UK operation is a very sophisticated trade financer in that respect. So we have a group which knows the business very well. We have a group that aspires for us to grow it. We have a group that can help us understand the risks of the Lebanese market and in that way help the Australians who trade with it. If you have all those ingredients together, our problem is really meeting the expectations that the group has on us. And in that respect, I hope we'll be meeting them. But the reality is the sky is the limit. I heard the potential for IT software being developed in Lebanon, and we have seen that as a solution for us as well. That's just small things we can do to encourage the trade. But the reality of our big result is always going to be reducing the risk between the two countries and getting the trade done, even though other banks wouldn't touch it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hassan, how do you think the Lebanese diaspora can the Lebanese diaspora in Australia can help enhancing Lebanese economic sector?
Obviously, the construction industry in Australia is always synonymous with the Lebanese community. Whenever you talk about the Lebanese community, you talk about construction. But the Lebanese have been successful in many other industries as well, which is, I think, don't get their fair share of success sharing stories, if you like. There's a lot of work that's been done by Australians of Lebanese background in Australia that Lebanon can benefit from in the area of, for example, home automation, alternative sources of energy, office IT work. There's a lot that Lebanon can, at the time when it's looking for alternative energy sources, right? And there's an energy crisis in Lebanon. Australia can actually provide a lot through Australian Lebanese business community here in Australia. There's a lot of success stories in this area that I think we haven't shown a light on these people in Australia to be able to actually impart their knowledge, impart their experiences, and share what they have with Lebanon to build industries in Lebanon along the same lines.
Thank you. Mr. Roland, how does the political situation in Lebanon on different local, regional, and global levels affect the Lebanese diaspora in Australia and its economic interests?
I think it's a very important element in the space of bilateral relations. And I think its impact is not confined to the Australian community of Lebanese descent, but I think it has an impact on the broader Australian community. Doing business in Australia is a fairly transparent process. We have the stability and the continuity of institutional structures which provide peace of mind and an element of security for investment and in doing business. The challenges that we face in Lebanon is often the perception of the stability and the continuity of institutional structures is in question. Whenever there are political changes in the political scape in Lebanon, that tends to have a direct impact on the continuity of the institutional structures or public service sector. This is obviously an issue of concern. It creates a negative perception about the general environment of doing business in Lebanon, which is overwhelmingly positive. It tends to overshadow all of the major advantages and positive aspects that Lebanon offers in terms of being a conducive environment for doing business and investment. And numerous examples of that is the ease of entry into the market in Lebanon, the availability of the enormous pool of skilled resources in human resources, the cost of doing business in Lebanon compared to many other countries around the globe. So there are many positive aspects that one would normally expect that would draw and attract foreign investment, especially from Australia, especially from Australians of Lebanese descent, who have a direct link with Lebanon. But unfortunately, some of those negative perceptions tend to overshadow all of the positive aspects of doing business in Lebanon. We are in the Australia Arab Chamber of Commerce. We have a brief that covers the 22 Arab League nations, of which Lebanon is a founding member. We do have a number of examples and a number of experiences where we can draw on to try and identify where these major impediments are and identify where the successes are in other areas of the region. If we take the Gulf region, for example, the United Arab Emirates is a pretty good example of that, where our current trade exchange exceeds $5 billion annually. So this merely explains the potential of where our bilateral trade relations, trade investment should be, considering all of the other positive aspects that we share between Australia and Lebanon that are not necessarily there with the Gulf region. And yet we don't seem to be progressing in the right direction because of those impediments which seem to be overshadowing all of the positive aspects of doing business and investing in Lebanon.
Thank you. Now we will have Mr. Gary for his small presentation on the trade relations between Australia and Lebanon.
Hi. Hello. Michael talked about books. I just read a book by a Lebanese philosopher called The Black Swan about probability and randomness. He was an investment banker and philosopher. Fantastic book. Also, I've been to Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and many countries in the region always for business. And yeah, there's some free time there, and I love the region, and I'm positive about the business possibilities and expanding those further. So I represent Austrade, the Australian Chamber of Commerce, Austrade Trade Start, an export services program, and work closely with the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce to enhance trade relations between Australia, Lebanon, and the whole Middle Eastern region and North Africa. So recently we have organised trade missions, business briefings, and direct business-to-business introductions in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Lebanon. And of note, these meetings, we held some of those in Beirut with the business community, and there were major regional players there across Africa. And the Australian delegates of that delegation, they gained deep insights into doing business in that part of the world. So with these deep relationships that were formed, they continued to grow, and our trade mission was actually fully supported by Australian Ambassador Mr. Glenn Miles in Lebanon, who accompanied the mission to key meetings and discussions. Last year, the New South Wales Business Chamber actually hosted the World Chambers Congress in Sydney at the new ICC Centre, and this actually brought 600 chambers of commerce to Sydney, over 1,000 international business people with a commercial focus. So the ALCC played an effective role in sponsoring and hosting the Middle East and North African delegations for that event. So that with the collaborative participation across the various events during this Chambers Congress, we held sessions, exhibitions, receptions, briefings, tours, and it was all served to strengthen the economic and business relationships between the MENA regions and Australia to create new trade channels and engagements. During these Middle East sessions, Mr. Joseph Rizek, the CEO of the Arab Bank Australia and Director of the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce, covered banking and commercial transactions in doing business with Lebanon and having Lebanon as a gateway to the MENA regions, while the HSBC Chief Economist, Mr. Paul Bloxham, covered in-depth economic trade investment and collaborative opportunities available in Australia. Mr. Rizek also addressed the International Bar Association of over 200 lawyers from across the world, including representatives from Lebanon, the MENA region, and touching on issues of trade, investment, and building the business relationships. So as you can see, we partner very closely and have formed good bonds to promote as much as possible trade and investment among the Middle Eastern markets and Australia. We also have specialists on the ground in these markets, and we utilise such specialists to understand halal requirements, pharmaceutical registration, specialised freight handling, and a result of this is always great business success. So I don't focus on just arranging meetings and delegations, but actually getting success for Australian and Lebanese companies and forming those partnerships. But what is trade and why trade? So Australia must be a trading nation. We trade with larger countries, but also smaller ones. And we don't just fly in and deal with customers, but we try to form local knowledge and connections to further the engagements. So having covered some of those relationships and so on, my area of export and international business with Austrade, what we seek to understand is who do we work with? So Australia exports approximately $310 billion in goods and services. If we take out $70 billion of services, that's $243 billion exported to the world. That's about 53,000 firms in Australia that are exporting. If we break up those firms into small, medium and large, the 400 largest exporters are actually contribute to 85% of all the exports going out of Australia. So that can be summed up also in terms of high volume trade, iron ore and oil and other commodities. But if we look at the medium-sized 10,000 firms across Australia, they export approximately $32 billion in goods. It's these agile and value-added exporters that we really try to focus all our efforts on, because they have potential throughout Asian high-growth countries, Middle Eastern markets, Africa and South America. So we look at the value add, the multi-market is really where the value is at, and we emphasize those services. And Lebanon's one of those regions that's an emerging market, and there are great opportunities that we're working on making clear to the export community. So just a little bit more on figures is our trade to the MENA region is actually quite high. It's over $15 billion in two-way trade. And our largest trading partner, the United Arab Emirates, it's growing at around 20% a year, which is a positive flow-on effect to the other markets in the region. And there's a strong need for food security, economic diversification, and social development, which are priority sectors which we as a Chamber and Austrade try to find those gaps and opportunities for. So we should be using Lebanon as a gateway to the Middle East, Africa as much as possible, as Lebanese business people are heavily engaged with those regions in construction, food and beverage, education, and areas of technical services. And that's what we do is through our consulting work is we engage those emerging economies. We help our clients get container loads, shipments of product to those markets, to their distributors and partners, and we find new companies with the capabilities to do the export trade in those markets. So I'm here because I love international trade. I think it's great. It benefits communities. It benefits the world. The economists have already come out with the theories of comparative advantage, and we look at opportunity costs. We talked about the myopic approach of some companies that don't understand and they are risk averse. However, what is the cost of not doing business in these markets that aren't being focused on? The hard work's been done in many of the high growth markets to our north. We need to look at specialised, unique, customised delegation visits and other meetings in the Lebanon and nearby countries. So as I wrap up, I've done missions to Japan, Singapore, Vietnam, South America just in the last 24 months. I'm highly proactive in international trade. I'm always looking for projects and developing missions to new markets such as Lebanon, where I've already taken clients before in the construction sector with high rate of success. So thank you very much. It's great to be here and support the two-way trade and multilateral trade.
Thank you, Mr. Gary. هلا عندي سؤال مشترك إذا بيجاوبوني عليه أستاذ فادي وأستاذ رولاند وأستاذ مايكل. بدي لكم إنه time is running and waiting nobody. Do you feel that you worked enough as chambers of commerce for enhancing commerce and trade between the Lebanese and Australia first, to talk later about what should be done between Lebanon and Australia?
I think we as Australia Lebanon Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we have been working very hard as there is a lot of work to be done, and there still will be always a lot of work to be done. You have to remember that the Lebanese economy has suffered a lot, a negative reputation during the civil war for many years. As I also indicated earlier, the media has also, if you like, exacerbated that negativity. In addition to that, there was no real interest from the Lebanese government or the Australian government to look at each other's economy and how they can do business together. Lebanon always looked at Australia as a country that's very far away and traditionally traded with the Gulf, Africa, and France and the United States. Australia was never there on their radar. And we try very hard through the constant trade missions, stimulating, if you like, an interest between the Lebanese business economy and the Australian economy and the Lebanese economy here, if you like, the Lebanese, diaspora in Australia, to actually let them know that first and foremost, Australia is a leading country in innovations. Many people don't even know that antibiotics came out of Australia, IVF out of Australia, the anti-pelvic cancer came out of, immunization came out of Australia, the black box in aviation came out of Australia, and so many innovations and so many breakthroughs came out of Australia, but Lebanon don't even know about it. And vice versa. They look at Lebanon as a war-torn country in a region that enjoys, or a region that actually suffers a lot of instability, and therefore Lebanon has no purpose. That's the opposite. As a matter of fact, we all know Lebanon actually, I myself personally, as a chairman, have invested in Lebanon, and I can tell everyone here around the room that my investment hasn't gone astray. It's been a fantastic investment. I have actually enjoyed even establishing the business. I received all the support I needed. I received all the professional support I need in Lebanon as well to establish my business and to, if you like, run it at a successful rate. So therefore, it is very important for us as a chamber to continue to work endlessly hard with the Australian government, Lebanese government, and the business communities and all the chambers that we have signed MOU with, Beirut Chamber, the Tripoli Chamber, and also the Australian Arab Chamber here in Australia as well, and to continuously to work all together to continue that relationship, because that's the only way we can bring the two nations together physically, as much as politically, and as much as the rest of our community here can enjoy the prosperity of this relationship.
Thank you. Mr. Michael?
I can tell you, Ibrahim, that it's an ongoing saga. We have helped boost the import of Lebanese products, I can say, quite dramatically, where not so long ago it was very, very, very low, extremely low. But there is another story, that some of the products that we are receiving from Lebanon do not come directly from Beirut. So these figures do not show in the Australian statistics, whether customs or quarantine. But what we are aiming for, apart from targeting niche Lebanese products on the Australian market, and we have made some headway, we would be very happy one day to have a venue where we can expose these beautiful products of ours, niche products from Lebanon. One venue. And out of that venue, that, we can distribute elsewhere in Australia as a whole. As I said, the figures have climbed slowly but surely, but we still have a long way to go. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. And I think we can say the same thing for the exports. It's bilateral, whether the import side or the export side. One of the major subjects that we have worked on, and I don't want to tell you how many years we've been working on it, but we don't give up easily. We will continue to push. And that is for the Lebanese government or the Lebanese Ministry of Agriculture to comply with our quarantine conditions here. We have very strict quarantine conditions in Australia to import fresh produce. And all the Australian diplomats that have served Lebanon from 95 onwards, they're all, they just love our produce. And we keep talking. Why aren't we able to import Lebanese fresh produce into Australia? And the reason is, our quarantine conditions are very, very strict. I will continue to pursue that, and I do it all the time in Beirut with officials at the Agri Ministry. Hoping, all I can tell you is hoping one day we'll be able to reach that goal. And that will be a milestone as far as our fresh produce is concerned. Lebanon at the moment is exporting to Europe and to many places. But one thing we have to be aware of, that we have very strict quarantine conditions in Australia, even between states. For instance, if you were going from New South Wales to Victoria, if we can call it a border, quarantine officials will stop you and say, what have you got? You have any apples? Get rid of it. So can you imagine how difficult it is? But my argument, or I'm somewhat angry, why others in the region are exporting to Australia, and why I don't want to name countries. They are exporting and we're not. But rest assured, I will keep on fighting for that to happen. I will not give up. Now, the last meeting I had the Agri Ministry, the top official said, Michael, we can't do any more. We are exporting to Europe, we don't have any problems. I said, look, that's Australia, let's do something. And, the sad part is the Australian government have offered to help, and in fact, an official from quarantine, did go to Beirut and had meetings through the Foreign Ministry. And the Foreign Minister knows about it. He knows, he's fully aware. But look, that is Lebanon, we have to accept. Let's not get too angry because it's a different setup. But you can rest assured we will not give up. we will keep on pushing. If that happens, and God willing it will be, that'll be a great, great thing for Lebanon. Not the exporters, but the producers. And Lebanon would have to produce a great deal more. I'll just give you an example. What we produce in cherries is not enough. You may not know this. We don't produce enough. We export a bit of it to Europe, some to Southeast Asia, but we don't have enough. So if we can open that, then the farmers would be encouraged to plant more cherry trees and many other trees, you know, like grapes, the apricots that we have. And I think everybody knows when we talk about Lebanese fruit and vegetables, you know, they are unique. There's a special taste that other countries do not have. So we as a chamber, we will continue to fight for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Roland.
Ibrahim, are we doing enough? And as chambers of commerce, can we do more? The answer is no, we are not doing enough. And yes, we can do more. We all work within our limited resources. We are one link in a chain. There are many other stakeholders, I think, that need to also work in that direction. There's always room to do more. It is a mission for us as chambers of commerce. We don't do the business ourselves. We facilitate the business interaction between the two sides, and we will continue to try and provide information, try and break down some of the barriers that do exist between the two sides. But we also work very closely with governments on both sides, and it's good to see that Austrade is represented here today in this debate, and we hope that this will probably shift Austrade's focus back to Lebanon. We did have an Austrade representative in Lebanon, based in Beirut, for a number of years, and that's being withdrawn. I think what is really needed from both sides is a clear policy of engagement, where strategic interests are pursued and national interests are pursued, and especially from Lebanon's perspective, where there is a clear policy of engagement reflective of the national interest of Lebanon, and then the allocation of the necessary resources to pursue and implement this engagement policy. As I indicated before, it's very timely that such events are taking place, where this exchange of ideas and views and exploring the challenges between the two sides, I just hope that we do have a mechanism for those conferences where not only that there are a list of recommendations that are resulting from those sessions, but also a mechanism in order to implement those recommendations, so that, you know, those interactions are not really forgotten after those events are taking place. So I hope that this is what will take place on this occasion.
Thank you. اسمحوا لي اشكر البانيلستس اللي شاركوا معنا فردا عن جديد، وبدي اشكر تحملكم على رتابة الكيو اند اي اللي صارت واللي حاولنا نكسرها بين فترة والتانية. هلا المجال مفتوح ل10 دقائق تقريبا اللي بحب يسأل أي سؤال للبانيلست. تفضل.
Thank you, Abraham, and the panel. You did a great job. I'd just like to add one aspect for the audience here. And it was mentioned, Roland mentioned, we had an Austrade rep in Beirut, Sylvie Khoury. And Sylvie's biggest complaint was that if anyone knows about Lebanon very much, as I spent many years and many times there, you look around, there's Holden Statesman, there's Camrys from Melbourne. None of those vehicle imports into Lebanon have ever been shown as imports from Australia direct. They all go through Dubai or through a dealership in UAE, and those figures are not recorded as Australian imports into Lebanon. So unfortunately, the figures are very distorted. And Lebanon has received a lot more goods and services from Australia, unfortunately. And I think, Michael, you or someone mentioned that there are goods coming the other way that are not recorded out of Lebanon because of merchants that apply their work from the UAE or from the Gulf, one of the Gulf countries. And those goods are coming from Lebanon indirectly. So the figures are not really reflective of what we've talked about here today. admittedly, there's great room for improvement. There's no question about that. But let's not oversee the fact that there is a lot of stuff going on, and it's unfortunate that Austrade don't have somebody there, and it's probably sorely needed now with the reconstruction of Syria coming up. Thank you.
تفضل.
My question is to Michael and Fadi at the same time. We all know that you have taken many delegations, business people from Australia to Lebanon, and your success is very well documented, both chambers. And thank you very much and congratulations. Don't you think it's time to bring some business people from Lebanon to Australia, vice versa, to invest here?
If I may start, Anwar, thank you very much for your question. Can't hear me? Hello? Yep. Thank you, Anwar, for your question. Yes, we have done a lot of trade missions back to Lebanon. I personally, from Victoria, we take almost 60 companies to Lebanon. And in the past, especially with the recent finding of the oil and gas on the coast of Lebanon, we've taken Woodside Petroleum, one of the largest company in Australia, to actually bid for the excavation and the circulation of the natural gas and petroleum in the region. And there was a lot of interest. Yes, I agree with you. This is one of the processes of also letting the Lebanese business community understand what Australia has to offer, because there is a lack of understanding and knowledge. And the way we want to do it, and I'm going to call on Sydney Chamber to work together to hold a big expo here in Australia, showcasing Australian products and services to the Lebanese business community and vice versa. And that's something I have on the agenda, and we hope we'll be able to bring it together.
Well, I think, Anwar, you're aware what we have been doing over the years, and you've met with a lot of delegations that we have received from Lebanon, and primarily we're interested in investing in Australia. And in the last one, the investment opportunities that was a great success at Le Royale, and I think you were there. So we as a chamber, of course, we have obligation. We have an obligation to this great country to promote what Australia has to offer. Our political and security stability. And that's the least we could do. So we've always had a balanced act, whether the outgoing or the incoming. And, you know, again, we will continue to push, as I said earlier, for great support from both governments, not only the Lebanese government, but the Australian government as well. Because, I mean, you know, when you look back and find they pulled out Austrade out of Beirut, when they should have kept Austrade in Beirut, because you had an enormous emerging market right next door. I mean, it was a silly move. I say that with all honesty, and we said that face to face with officialdom. I said, why the hell do you have to pull out Austrade at this stage, when there's so much that can be done? So yes, we will always promote trade and investment both ways.
Anwar, if I may also add to your question as well, it's very important for the Australian government and Australian business community, and especially Austrade, something that they need to be aware of. We're not dealing only again with Lebanon as such, we're dealing with the Australian diaspora around the world. They are an enormous business potential with them. That's what you have to focus on. And you cannot put Lebanon out of the equation whatsoever. If you look at the region, yes, you have a fantastic trade figures with the UAE. But as I said, there's a lot of companies, are Lebanese companies trading under UAE laws, and they have to be incorporated under the UAE with a local partner. They have no choice. But at the end of the day, they are orchestrated, they are operated, they are run by a Lebanese. So Austrade has to educate itself with that, and we must focus on Lebanon and its community around the world and build a stronger relationship with the Lebanese government. And here I'd like to again greet and thank our minister, who is working really hard to bring this to fruition between each other. So thank you.
Thank you.
Let me add to that. As I said in my paper, we're always promoting Beirut as a hub to transact in the whole Middle East region. Why? Because our business community is the most active in the Middle East. And we have proven that to the Australian authorities. Because all those that we have taken with us to Lebanon, they met with these people and they saw the abilities of what these people can do, because Lebanon is a small market. You know, Lebanon is not a big market. But our players, our business players, they are the major players in the Gulf, North Africa, and even far beyond, even Europe. And the Australian side was able to feel that, you know, to touch that close hand. And that's what we work on.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Anwar, may I say something? I think we're very fortunate to have IDAL among us. IDAL is a company, government organization that's its role is obviously to promote and encourage trade between Lebanon and the rest of the world. I know for a fact that there are a lot of concessions provided by the Lebanese government for expats to trade and to invest in Lebanon. But unfortunately, we are not aware of it. We don't know about it to be able to utilize it and use it to our benefit. And that's where I call on IDAL to become a bit more proactive and aggressive in promoting those concessions that the Lebanese government provide to an expat to invest in Beirut.
Michael, can you comment on this as a tax haven?
The effort has got to be both ways. What you speak about confidence. I mean, this is not foreign to anyone. We know that our people have lost confidence in their own governments. We got to be frank about this. They have lost confidence, and we can't blame them because they've been in the dark for so long. Nobody cared about them. Let's hope we can see a change. Unless we see a change, and unless the people in the diaspora, whether Australia or anywhere in the world, regain that confidence, and that's what we as a chamber keep working on. We keep telling people, look, Lebanon is not all corruption. Lebanon is, you know, we have a positive side, and I've mentioned in my paper the positive side. So why should we ignore always the positive and concentrate on the negative? It doesn't make sense. Touch on the negative and do something. Don't just nag and brag, because that's not going to get us anywhere. We are all responsible, people or government. Stop putting the blame on one side. We are all to blame. I mean, I see, Anwar, people, and let's be honest, we are here sitting, we got to talk frankly. They come and live here for 50 years.
They go back and they behave in the same manner that they behaved 50 years ago. Where's that going to lead us? You tell me. Is that the way we're going to build Lebanon? And stop saying we love Lebanon. Stop saying the word we love Lebanon. Either do something or just sit there and do nothing. And don't say we love Lebanon.
Anyway, going back to tax concessions as well, so the last comment I make is, again, I think it is our duty to work with the Lebanese government as chambers of commerce, to work also with our counterparts in Lebanon, the Beirut chamber, the Tripoli, and all the other chambers who actually represent the private enterprise in Lebanon, who actually work really hard as well to create a stable economy, work closely with all the other government institutions such as the Reserve Bank, and among other organizations that are available for us to work with and to bring them to fruition, to bring a relationship to fruition with each other. So again, it is up to us to make a lot more effort than we have done so far. So.
I have one question here because I've been waiting for a little bit regarding, I would like to direct my question to Michael Rizal. You say stop loving Lebanon. We're going to love it, whether you say it or not, because I know you love it more than all of us. Recently, we heard you were involved in founding an oncology hospital in Lebanon, which is unique in the history of Lebanon. And I know how much you worked hard in it, and the dream is now in practice. What is the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce role to involve the powers, the potential of doctors who are working in Australia? As you know, there's a large number of this. Do you have any plan for those people to engage in this hospital in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmedin. Yeah, we were approached by an Australian company who has done a lot of work in Lebanon, done a lot of research, and saw the potential to set up an oncology hospital in the Bekaa Valley. And that hospital is not only to cater for the Lebanese, but to cater for the whole region. Now, as you know, I mean, you know, building a hospital even in Australia is not an easy task. But the objective is one that can only, you know, lead to Lebanon to a much higher position when it comes to the medical field. They are still working on it. In fact, the Australian side are still based in Lebanon, following up with the relevant bodies, trying to come up and really see this exercise take shape. And this will be a historic move for Lebanon and for the whole region. And, you know, recently we had, only a few days ago, Dr. Philippe Salim, who spoke about cancer and how the world was trying to cope with the cancer issue. So when you hear that countries like America are still having problems, you know, we can sort of look at Lebanon and say, let's hope Lebanon can pull it off and really move forward. Thank you for that.
I just wanted to address that Austrade comment because there's over 200 countries in the world. There's about 100 Austrade offices around the world, and as I said earlier, Austrade has services for established markets and emerging, so they can't have a presence, and that's where the Australian Lebanese Chamber of Commerce is very important, because we took missions to that region, that country, and there's no Austrade office there, and it was successful in getting Australian companies into the market. So we focus on the priority sectors of health, food, agriculture, oil and gas, and so on, and then we focus on certain markets of high growth and new emerging markets. I mean, there isn't an Austrade office in you know, many African countries and so on. So I mean, you know, scarcity of resources, we know that.
بدي أعتذر عن تلقي أي سؤال جديد لأنه صرنا عم ناخذ من وقت البانل اللي بعدنا، وبدي أشكر الجميع مرة تانية على الحضور والمشاركة. شكراً.